You've heard compound interest can make you wealthy, so why doesn't it feel like it's working for you? Someone can invest for months, sometimes years, and barely notice a single difference in their account balance. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody mentions up front. The problem usually isn't compound interest itself. It's how time, money, and consistency are actually being handled behind the scenes, long before any chart starts curving upward. Strip away the jargon, and the concept is almost embarrassingly simple. Money gets invested, that investment can earn a return, and instead of pulling those earnings out, they stay right where they are, invested alongside the original amount. Here's the part most explanations skip. Those earnings can then generate their own earnings. It's not one snowball rolling downhill. It's a snowball that somehow starts producing smaller snowballs of its own along the way, gathering more than it started with. This is fundamentally different from just parking cash in a drawer, where $1 today stays exactly $1 next year. And one thing worth saying clearly right up front, investments carry risk, and returns are never guaranteed, no matter how confident anyone sounds explaining the math. Understanding this part matters because the next few minutes are about to complicate that simple picture. Ask someone who quit investing after 8 months why they stopped, and the answer is almost always some version of, "It just wasn't doing anything." Fair complaint, except it's aimed at the wrong culprit entirely, blaming the math when the real issue was simply patience running out too soon. Compound growth is famously, almost insultingly slow at the start. The first few years can look flat on a chart, barely worth screenshotting, let alone bragging about to anyone. That's not a malfunction. That's just what the early stage of this process looks like for everyone who's ever tried it. Years 1 through 5 tend to whisper the same discouraging question: is this even working? Years 10 through 20 answer back, loud enough that nobody has to ask anymore. Most people give up during the whisper, right before the shift they never got to witness. Nobody expects a single seed to grow into a full tree overnight. Yet plenty of people invest $50 one single time, check back 8 months later, and feel genuinely confused about why nothing life-changing has happened yet. Compound interest doesn't perform miracles on a tiny one-time base. It needs something ongoing to actually work with. $50 invested once behaves nothing like $50 invested every single month without fail. And $500 a month tells a completely different story than either of those. A warehouse worker picking up extra hours during the holiday season might redirect that overtime pay toward monthly contributions instead of letting it disappear into everyday spending. That single shift changes the entire trajectory quietly. The real question was never just what return am I getting? It's how much am I actually putting to work, month after month. A gym membership used twice in January and forgotten by March doesn't build strength. The same exact pattern shows up in investing, and it's just as easy to fall into without ever meaning to. Contributing for a few months, then pausing during a tight stretch, then picking it back up 6 months later feels harmless in the moment. It isn't. Irregular contributions quietly break the momentum. Compounding actually depends on to work properly over time. Someone renting an apartment alone might stop contributing during a rough financial month, fully intending to restart soon, and then simply doesn't. Not out of laziness, just because life kept moving and the account slipped out of mind. An automated system removes that gap entirely. It doesn't wait for motivation to show back up before doing its job. A ship doesn't sink because a storm rolled through. It sinks because someone panicked and steered it straight into the rocks trying to escape. Markets work in a strikingly similar way. Pulling money out every time prices drop interrupts a long-term plan before it ever gets the chance to actually work. Volatility and permanent loss get treated like the same thing constantly, and they simply aren't. One is temporary noise, the other is final. This isn't a blanket argument for never sell no matter what. That kind of absolute rule ignores real circumstances and real risk tolerance. What actually matters is having a strategy built around personal goals from the start, one steady enough to survive a bad headline without triggering a panic decision at exactly the wrong moment. Here's an unpopular opinion, and it's probably not what anyone wants to hear after watching countless videos promising fast results. Chasing quick returns isn't a shortcut. It's usually the reason the whole plan falls apart. Expecting fast results tends to push people into constantly switching investments, hunting for whatever's trending this particular week. That habit racks up costs, invites emotional decision-making, and rarely outperforms just leaving things alone in the first place. Compound growth was never designed to be a sprint. It works best as a long, unglamorous, long-term strategy, not a bet placed hoping to get rich by next quarter. Patience isn't the exciting answer here. It's just the one that actually holds up when the math gets enough time to matter. A 1% fee sounds practically invisible on paper, barely worth a second glance. Over decades, that same small number can quietly consume a shocking share of what would have otherwise stayed invested and growing. Small fees look harmless in isolation, which is exactly what makes them dangerous. Nobody notices a leak this slow until they finally add up the total damage years later. Understanding expense ratios, account fees, and any recurring costs attached to an investment isn't about becoming obsessed with finding the single cheapest option available. It's simply about knowing what's being paid and why, instead of assuming zero attention is required. A grocery store shopper carefully compares prices on cereal boxes down to the cent, yet skips reading the fee disclosure on an account holding their entire retirement. That gap in attention deserves a second look. Trying to grow wealth through investments while high-interest debt sits untouched in the background is like running on a treadmill set to incline while someone keeps cranking the speed higher behind your back. Money invested is trying to grow. Debt left unpaid is also growing, often faster, through interest working in the opposite direction. Focusing entirely on one side of that equation while ignoring the other undermines the whole strategy before it ever gets a fair shot. Depending on the situation, clearing expensive debt first can matter more than adding extra money to investments. This isn't about abandoning compound growth. It's about making sure nothing's actively working against it at an even higher rate. Fix the leak. Then let the rest of the plan actually do its job without a hole cut straight through it. Somewhere along the way, compound interest picked up a reputation it never actually earned. The idea that money simply grows every single day, automatically, like clockwork nobody has to think about. That's not reality. Investments rise and fall, sometimes within the same week, sometimes within the same hour. The returns driving compound growth are never certain, no matter how clean the illustration looks in a video or a textbook chart. This distinction matters more than it seems. Treating compound interest like a guarantee sets people up for disappointment the first time the market has a rough month, and rough months happen regularly, not occasionally. Understanding this up front isn't discouraging. It's protective. It's exactly what keeps this whole idea from turning into a get-rich-quick promise it was never built to deliver. Picture someone investing $100 a month during a tight year, then bumping that up to $200 once things stabilize, then $500 a few years later as income grows. None of this happens overnight, and none of it was ever supposed to. Increasing contributions gradually in step with real life reshapes the entire outcome far more than obsessing over which fund technically performs 0.5% better than another. The early stage was never about instant results. Anyone expecting fireworks in year one was set up to be disappointed from the very beginning. It was about building the habit first, then the base, then letting both slowly expand together over time. Someone checking their account after a rough month might see barely any movement at all. That's not failure. That's just what the beginning of this process has always looked like. Two people can invest the exact same total amount over their lifetime and end up in completely different places purely because one of them started earlier than the other. Starting earlier can mean needing to contribute less overall to reach the same goal, depending on how returns play out along the way. Time does a portion of the work that money alone simply can't replicate on its own. Starting later doesn't mean the door has quietly closed, though. It might just mean saving a bit more each month, staying relentlessly consistent, working a little longer before retiring, or adjusting expectations to match a shorter runway. There's an old saying that fits perfectly here. The best time to plant a tree was years ago. The second best time is right now, starting today. Willpower makes a convincing promise and then breaks it constantly, especially when money is involved and a paycheck just landed in the account. Setting up automatic investments removes that fight before it even starts. The contribution happens the moment money arrives, pulled out before it ever has the chance to get spent on something else entirely. A nurse coming off a 12-hour shift isn't going to manually transfer money into an investment account at midnight, and honestly, she shouldn't have to carry that mental weight on top of everything else already demanding her attention. This single fix removes the daily reliance on motivation completely. Investing stops being a decision made over and over and simply becomes something that happens, quietly, in the background every single time. Starting too aggressively usually backfires, the same way sprinting the first mile of a marathon guarantees a rough finish later on. A sustainable starting amount matters more than an impressive one that can't actually be maintained. Begin with whatever fits comfortably into the current budget, even if that number feels small compared to what influencers online claim they're investing every month. Then raise it as income grows, treating every increase as an opportunity rather than an afterthought. Bonuses and raises can be partially redirected toward investments instead of getting fully absorbed by new spending the moment they arrive. Not the whole amount, just a meaningful slice of it, set aside before lifestyle expands to match the new number completely. Checking investment performance every single day is a reliable way to feel anxious about numbers that were never designed to be judged on that short of a timeline in the first place. A long-term plan shouldn't be evaluated week by week or even month by month, based on headlines designed to grab attention rather than inform. Setting real targets for 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years gives the whole strategy something meaningful to actually be measured against. Progress should get compared to that target, not to whatever the market happened to do this particular Tuesday afternoon. One is useful information. The other is mostly noise dressed up to look urgent. Zoom out far enough, and most of the daily drama quietly disappears from view entirely. Nobody controls the market. Not a single person watching this video, and not the person who built the strategy behind it either. That part simply isn't negotiable, no matter how much anyone wishes otherwise. What actually can be controlled is savings rate, how much gets contributed, what costs are being paid, how diversified things are, and how someone behaves during a volatile stretch instead of panicking through it. And when cutting expenses hits its natural limit, because there's genuinely nothing left worth trimming without making daily life miserable, increasing income becomes the next real lever available. New skills, a better opportunity, a side project that actually pays. Higher income, paired with a lifestyle that doesn't expand to match it dollar for dollar, means more money available to actually compound. That combination changes the entire trajectory far more than any single investment choice ever could. Compound interest isn't broken. It never was, and it never will be. The math behind it has worked exactly the same way for centuries, quietly, whether anyone's paying attention to it or not. The strategy behind it, though, is a completely different story, and that distinction changes everything about how this whole problem should actually get approached going forward. Blaming the concept for a disappointing result is like blaming gravity for a badly built bridge. The real question was never about finding some secret formula hidden away, waiting patiently to be discovered by the right person at exactly the right moment. There isn't one, and there never was. It's about building a system, one that lets money stay invested, stay consistent, and grow undisturbed, for as long as it actually takes for the math to finally matter. That's the whole answer. It was never complicated. It was just easy to walk away from too soon. If this helped you see your investing strategy more clearly, follow the channel. There's a lot more like this coming, built for exactly this kind of thinking. Before you go, here's something worth answering honestly instead of scrolling past. Which one of these problems has actually been holding your money back the most? Not giving it enough time, investing too little, or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments. Sometimes just naming the real problem is the first step toward finally fixing it.